The boom was not the sound of artillery, nor the thunderclap of a sky splitting open. It was quieter, subtler, more insidious. A diplomat's gavel striking against polished stone, announcing in the great chamber of the Galactic Empire that Earth had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. That verdict carried across the stars, echoing into every listening ear, a declaration heavy with the cold certainty of judgment. The Empire's decree was simple. Humanity avoided war not from wisdom, but from cowardice, and therefore could never be trusted as equals. It was a tragedy dressed as diplomacy, the kind that did not spill blood in the streets immediately, but drained nations dry with shame. Whole centuries of sacrifice, the trenches of Europe, the deserts of Africa, the steaming jungles of the Pacific, were dismissed as childish brawls, little more than mud fights in the eyes of creatures who had long since forgotten the taste of fear. On Earth, the news cycle bent around that sentence. Anchormen smirked nervously, professors adjusted their glasses and wrote rebuttals, while ordinary men and women muttered over their beers that the aliens didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Colonel Jack Harlow had listened in silence. He was 55, weathered not with wrinkles alone, but with that settled hardness of a man who had looked into the abyss too many times and kept his humor intact only because it was cheaper than whiskey. He'd served in wars the public barely remembered, dirty little conflicts where the line between peacekeeping and butchery blurred. He'd buried too many friends under too many flags. Now retired, or at least pretending to be. He wore a suit instead of fatigues, but his eyes gave him away, steady, sharp, and entirely unwilling to let insult pass unanswered. He was not supposed to be there, not officially. The United Nations had asked for low-profile liaisons at the first diplomatic reception between Earth and the Empire. Jack, under the harmless title of logistics officer, had been slipped into the delegation like a knife under a napkin. His role was to smile, shake hands, and take notes. His purpose was something else entirely. The reception was held in a UN sub-basement that smelled faintly of damp stone and bad coffee, chosen deliberately to undercut the pomp of the arriving aliens. If the Empire expected chandeliers and golden carpets, they would find fluorescent bulbs that flickered, folding chairs that groaned when sat upon, and diplomats who had seen too many budget cuts to bother with ceremony. When the alien shuttle touched down on the East River landing pad, camera crews scrambled, commentators whispered about a new chapter in galactic history, and ordinary New Yorkers grumbled about traffic delays. Jack simply rolled the toothpick in his mouth and muttered, "Hell of a chapter. Hope it's not a short one." The first to step off the shuttle were the Valorians, tall, bird-like creatures with golden plumage that rippled with pride in every motion. Their ambassador, Saelric, spread his wings slightly as though the air itself owed him respect. Behind them slithered the Droxan delegation, amphibious and perpetually moist, robes dragging damp streaks across the concrete. They carried scrolls and tablets, obsessed with treaties like priests with holy texts. Lastly, the Orokai entered, insectoid scholars, their compound eyes reflecting every flicker of light, antennae twitching with wary curiosity. The humans offered handshakes. The Valorians recoiled as though insulted. The Droxan fumbled with towels to wipe their hands afterward, and the Orokai alone mimicked the gesture with almost touching earnestness. Cameras flashed, journalists murmured, but Jack was watching not with the press's hunger for headlines, but with a predator's patience. He studied the gait, the posture, the confidence. Every tick was a tell. Inside the chamber, mismatched chairs and a cracked microphone awaited the grand meeting. The aliens looked horrified. Saelric's feathers ruffled with disdain. "This is the seat of Earth's diplomacy," he asked, voice like steel scraping stone. "Budget cuts," Jack said pleasantly, stepping forward as though he were nothing more than a helpful usher. "We spent most of it on defense." He let the words hang with just enough sweetness that only the Orokai caught the sting. The Droxan unfurled a scroll longer than a man was tall. Their leader, Veltor, began listing grievances: Earth's wars, Earth's weapons, Earth's irrational devotion to conflict. He spoke as if condemning a child for playing with matches. "You have fought yourselves for millennia. You have scarred your own planet. You are incapable of restraint. That is why the Empire will oversee your future. You will not be equals. You will be wards. Jack poured himself a cup of lukewarm coffee. The scrape of the pot against its burner seemed loud in the silence that followed. He took a sip, winced theatrically, and muttered, "Damn thing's always bitter. Like some people I know." He set it down with a deliberate clink and said louder, "Wards, huh? Funny. That's the same word we used for orphans back home. Guess that makes you our foster parents. Hope you're patient. We're not easy kids." A ripple of uneasy amusement moved through the human delegation, but the aliens did not laugh. Saelric's feathers darkened, an avian sign of anger. "You misunderstand. We offer protection." Jack's smile was mild, but his eyes were not. Protection from what? He gestured toward the skyline visible through a small, grimy window. "From ourselves? Hate to break it to you, but we've been protecting ourselves for a long damn time. Got real good at it too." Veltor's gills flared. "Your records show endless wars. Genocide. The deliberate detonation of atomic weapons upon your own species. How can you speak of being good at it?" Jack leaned back, folding his hands across his stomach as though telling a bedtime story. "Because we're still here." There was no drama in his tone, no raised voice, just a simple fact delivered with the weight of continents behind it. The Orokai scholar clicked its mandibles softly, a sound of nervous respect. The meeting wore on, each alien speech dripping with condescension, each human reply couched in polite irony. A tray of donuts was passed around. The Veilorian sniffed disdainfully. The Droxan tried one and gagged. The Orokai consumed 3 with unnerving delight. Jack leaned toward them and whispered, "Careful. Those things are addictive. Whole empires have fallen to worse." Laughter from the humans, a sharp tilt of antennae from the Orokai. The room had shifted, if only slightly. Yet the core remained. The Empire saw Earth as a child too reckless to be left alone. Jack listened, jotted notes in a pad he didn't need, and occasionally interjected with a phrase so American in its cadence that the aliens had to ask for translation. "Don't poke the bear. Hold your horses. Keep your powder dry." Each one, explained in his patient drawl, landed like a veiled threat dressed as folksy wisdom. Hours passed. The coffee grew colder. The alien's disdain grew sharper. At one point, Saelric leaned forward, feathers brushing the microphone, and declared, "Your history proves you fear war. You avoid it. That is why you are weak." Something shifted in Jack's posture. He did not smile this time. He closed his notebook slowly, placed it on the table, and looked the ambassador directly in the eye. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "You're right," he said. "We do avoid war. Like a farmer avoids setting fire to his own field. Like a hunter avoids killing every deer in the woods. Like a man avoids punching every drunk who mouths off at a bar. We avoid it because when we don't, nothing survives." The silence that followed was different this time. No chuckles, no polite coughs. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hesitate in their flicker. The aliens shifted uneasily, their earlier certainty dented by something they could not name. Jack leaned back again, easy as before, but his eyes held no warmth now. He tapped his pen against the notebook, each click echoing louder than it should. "So yeah, we avoid war. Best you hope we keep avoiding it." The Orokai's antennae trembled. Saelric's feathers flattened uneasily. Veltor opened his mouth to speak, but found no words. Jack rose, adjusting his jacket as though preparing to leave for nothing more serious than a lunch break. "If you'll excuse me," he said, tone polite again, "I'll step out for a bit. Don't go anywhere." He walked toward the door, leaving behind the taste of coffee and something sharper in the air. For the first time that day, the aliens felt the faint, unfamiliar chill of prey, sensing a predator nearby. The boom was not cannon fire, but the shattering weight of memory, a tragedy older than any of the empires now strutting through Earth's halls. It was the echo of names carved on black stone, soldiers who had died in wars no one wanted to remember, yet no one could afford to forget. Humanity carried that sound within them, a drumbeat beneath polite laughter, a silence stitched into every joke. The aliens could not hear it, not yet. They mistook the quiet for weakness, the humor for submission. When Jack Harlow re-entered the chamber, he carried that silence with him, wrapped in the easy gait of a man who had seen too much and learned to hide it beneath charm. He adjusted his jacket, returned to his seat, and poured himself another bitter cup of coffee. The aliens were waiting, feathers ruffled, gills flaring, mandibles twitching. They had spoken in his absence, redoubling their claims that Earth was reckless, warlike, dangerous even to itself. Yet when Jack returned, their words faltered, as though his very presence bent the room toward him. "Where were we?" Jack asked, voice calm, almost friendly. He stirred his coffee with a plastic spoon, the clink of it against the paper cup oddly deliberate. Saelric, the Valorian ambassador, leaned forward, plumage shimmering with disdain. "We were explaining that your species has no place at the table of peace. You are too violent, too chaotic, too undisciplined." Jack nodded slowly, as though the ambassador had just suggested the weather might turn. "And yet, here we are, at the table anyway. Must be awkward for you." The Droxan Veltor unrolled another section of his endless scroll, moisture dripping onto the floor as he lectured. "The evidence is overwhelming. Your nuclear stockpiles alone irrational. The frequency of your wars irrational. Even your methods of recreation irrational. Simulated violence in your entertainments. Competitive sport mimicking combat. Entire industries devoted to dramatizing slaughter." Jack raised his eyebrows. "That's called football. And if you think that's slaughter, you've never seen Philly fans after a playoff loss." The human delegation laughed. The aliens did not. Jack leaned back, folding his arms with casual ease. "But I'll grant you this, we do like to practice. We treat games as training, movies as reminders, stories as warnings. Call it irrational if you want. To us, it's insurance." The Orokai scholar clicked softly, antennae quivering with what might have been intrigue. "You mean to suggest your culture prepares for war in every gesture, every pastime?" Jack smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. "Not prepares. Lives with it. Breeds it into our bones. From campfires to coliseums, from muskets to missiles. We've never had the luxury of forgetting it exists. Every human knows, deep down, what violence costs. That's why we keep the memory close, like a loaded gun on the nightstand." The silence that followed was uncomfortable, but Jack refused to fill it. He let the words hang, let the aliens see how little effort it took to say them. Saelric broke the stillness with a derisive laugh. "You confess it openly. You are obsessed with war, and you expect us to treat you as equals." Jack took a long sip of coffee, winced, and set it down. "Obsessed? No. Respectful, maybe. Like respecting a forest fire. We know what it can do, so we don't play with matches unless we have to. You mistake restraint for fear, Ambassador. That's your error, not ours." Veltor slapped the scroll with a wet hand, droplets scattering. "Your restraint is temporary. Your history proves it. You will always return to war. That is why we must contain you." Jack pulled something from his pocket and slid it across the table. A battered challenge coin, worn smooth at the edges, the emblem of his old Marine unit etched faintly on its surface. The alien stared, unsure. "What is this?" Saelric demanded. "A promise," Jack said. "Between warriors. You earn one of these, you carry it forever. Means you've been tested. Means you'll never back down, even when you're outnumbered. We give them as tokens. Reminders. I thought maybe you'd like to see what a real promise looks like." The Orokai tilted its head, mandibles clicking with fascination. The Droxan recoiled, as though it might be a weapon. Saelric sneered. "Childish trinkets." Jack chuckled. "Maybe. But some of the hardest men I've ever known would sooner die than dishonor one. We don't all live by scrolls and feathers, gentlemen. Some of us live by the weight of a coin in the pocket and the memory of what it cost to earn it." The conversation turned sharper after that. The Valorians spoke of dominance, the Droxan of treaties, the Orokai of caution. Jack listened, sometimes with his eyes half closed, sometimes with a grin curling the corner of his mouth. When asked directly, he answered with metaphors that sounded harmless until the aliens thought about them. "Don't poke the bear. Keep your powder dry. All hat, no cattle. The translators struggled. The aliens demanded explanations. Jack gave them with patience, every phrase a story, every story a veiled threat. The humans in the room caught on quickly, their lips twitching at the absurdity of watching galactic envoys puzzled over cowboy sayings. But beneath the humor was steel, and the aliens began to sense it. At one point, an Orokai aide reached for a donut, dipped it into a cup of hot sauce by mistake, and nearly collapsed from a burn. Its shrill clicking echoed in the chamber. Jack handed it a glass of water, utterly deadpan. That's called flavor. Builds character. Some of us even like the pain. The aide shuddered, drinking desperately. The Orokai scholar studied Jack with new wariness. Your kind consumes pain. Jack shrugged. Little bit. Spices things up. The Valorians were appalled. The Droxan muttered among themselves. The humans tried not to laugh. Still, the Empire pressed its superiority. Salric declared that Earth would be annexed for its own good. Veltor argued that human armies should be dismantled and replaced by benevolent supervision. The Orokai, cautious but not defiant, murmured that it might be unwise to provoke a species so recently introduced. Jack leaned forward, folding his hands, his voice smooth as silk. You talk about dismantling armies like you're pulling weeds. But you ever notice something about weeds? You pull them up, they grow back. Stronger, meaner, with deeper roots. Try that with us, and you'll find yourself ankle-deep in something you can't control. There was a murmur through the chamber, not from the aliens, but from the humans. Something in Jack's tone had shifted. Less humor now. More shadow. Veltor slammed the scroll shut. Enough. You will sign the Accords of Subservience, or you will be dealt with. This is the will of the Empire. Jack's eyes narrowed, though his voice remained steady. Funny thing about wills. They're usually read at funerals. The silence that followed was colder than before, sharp as a knife's edge. Salric bristled, feathers rising. The Droxan hissed. Even the Orokai froze, antennae stiff. Jack reached for his notebook, scribbled something casually, then set the pen down. His hand lingered near his jacket, a small motion, almost imperceptible, but the kind of thing predators noticed. He smiled again, warm and easy. Don't worry. I'm just writing down your concerns. Hate for anyone to say we weren't listening. But his eyes, those steady, humorless eyes, told a different story. For the first time, the Empire's envoys understood that they might not be the only ones holding power in the room. The boom was not sound but realization, the kind that detonates inside the mind when pride collides with truth. A tragedy without smoke or blood, born from the recognition that something long mocked was never weak at all. For the first time, the Galactic envoys felt the faint crack along the surface of their certainty, and that boom, though silent, reverberated through every corner of the chamber. The session had dragged into late afternoon, the coffee long gone bitter, and the donuts reduced to crumbs on paper plates. The air felt heavier now, the weight of unspoken words pressing down. The Valorian ambassador, Salric, flared his feathers with a kind of smugness that grows most poisonous when it fears being exposed. Enough word games, he snapped. We will establish authority here and now. Earth will surrender its weapons, its fleets, its capacity for conflict. The Empire requires compliance. Jack Harlow sat still, fingers laced, the faintest crease at the corner of his mouth betraying nothing more than a flicker of amusement. Surrender our weapons, he said softly, almost like he was repeating a recipe. That'd be like asking a fish to surrender water, or a bird its wings. He leaned forward, eyes glinting with the quiet intensity of a man who had grown used to being underestimated. Weapons aren't what make us dangerous. They're just tools. Take them away, and we'll make more. Take those away, and we'll sharpen rocks. Hell, take the rocks, and we'll use our teeth. We've done it before. Veltor, the Droxan diplomat, hissed, moisture spraying from his gills. Your defiance is irrational. Your violence is pathological. You court destruction with every word. Jack sipped his coffee and shrugged. Irrational? Maybe. But so's charging a machine gun nest to drag a buddy out. So's running into a burning building for someone you've never met. Funny thing about irrational. It's kept us alive longer than reason ever could. The Orokai scholar tilted its head, mandibles clicking. He speaks truth laced with paradox. They find strength in madness. Saelric slapped the table with his talons, making the cracked microphone squeal. This insolence cannot stand. You are surrounded by empires older than your entire species. We could snuff you out like a candle. Jack's grin widened slightly, though his voice dropped into something lower, steadier. Yeah, candles are fragile, but they've burned down cities before. Sometimes all it takes is one flame in the right place. The air chilled. The human delegation stiffened, sensing the edge beneath his words. The aliens puffed themselves taller, louder, but behind their eyes flickered something new, uncertainty. It was then a Droxan guard, a hulking brute clad in scaled armor, made the mistake of stepping forward. His bulbous eyes swept the humans with disdain, and then, as if to punctuate his master's threat, he shoved the nearest human in turn. The boy stumbled, nearly falling against the table, his notepad scattering across the floor. He could not have been older than 22, wide-eyed, unarmed, and entirely unthreatening. The shove itself was not hard enough to kill, but it carried centuries of insult with it, centuries of occupation and arrogance condensed into one dismissive gesture. Jack's expression did not change. He rose without hurry, as though stretching his legs, his movements deceptively casual. In less than a breath, the room changed. The coffee mug, still half full, arced upward in his hand and shattered against the Droxan guard's throat, ceramic shards cutting wet flesh. Before the sound of its breaking had faded, Jack had closed the distance, his other hand producing a pen he had idly twirled minutes before. That pen buried itself into the second guard's eye socket with surgical precision. The alien dropped without a sound. Gasps erupted. Saelric screeched, feathers flaring like fire. Veltor howled in disbelief. The Orokai clicked furiously, half in alarm, half in awe. Jack didn't pause. He slipped a compact pistol from beneath his jacket, a weapon none had seen him carry, and leveled it with the calm steadiness of a man who had spent his life breathing under fire. A third alien guard collapsed with a hole between its eyes before the others even realized what was happening. 3 guards dead. A mug, a pen, a sidearm. All in the span of heartbeats. The room was chaos. Human aides shouted. Alien diplomats recoiled, scrambling back from the sudden violence. Security alarms wailed. But Jack stood in the center of it all, shoulders squared, eyes cold, the faintest curl of a smile on his lips, as if he had simply proven a point. You asked if we avoided war, he said, voice carrying through the din. You're right. We do. Because when we don't, this is what it looks like. The silence that followed his words was louder than the alarms. The alien stared, feathers quivering, gills flaring, antennae rigid. The humans stared too, though theirs was not horror, it was recognition. They had always known. Veltor stammered, his gills flapping wildly. This is an act of war. Jack cocked his head, holstering the pistol with the same ease as setting down a pen. Nah. This was restraint. If it were war, none of you would still be breathing. The Orokai scholar whispered to no one in particular, mandibles clicking with dreadful clarity. The mask is off. They are predators. They have always been predators. Jack turned, picking up the challenge coin he had left on the table earlier. He rolled it between his fingers, its metal catching the harsh light. Funny thing, he murmured. You keep saying we fear war. Truth is, we just wait for someone stupid enough to bring it to our doorstep. The Veilorian ambassador screeched, talons tearing grooves into the table. You will pay for this outrage. The Empire will unleash its full might upon you. Jack's eyes met his, steady and unflinching. Good. That's the part one was waiting for. The words hung heavy. More than threat, more than defiance. They carried the weight of design, of inevitability. Something about his calmness, about the precision of his violence, suggested this was not improvisation. It was a script already written. The alien delegations exchanged looks, panic slipping through cracks in arrogance. The humans said nothing, though some exchanged glances with Jack, silent confirmation passing like current between them. Veltor tried again, voice cracking with outrage. You engineered this. You provoked us." Jack's smile sharpened. "Engineered? No. We just gave you the rope. You tied the knot yourselves." The Oricai's antennae drooped. This was bait. Jack flipped the coin once, caught it, and slid it back into his pocket. Bingo. The alarms still wailed. Reinforcements were surely on the way. The chamber reeked of scorched ozone, spilled alien ichor, bitter coffee, and the sharp tang of fear. And yet, Jack seemed utterly at ease. He poured himself another cup of coffee, as if nothing had happened, sipping it slowly. "Still bitter," he muttered. "Guess some things don't change." The humans watched him, unease mixing with admiration. The aliens glared, trembling between rage and terror. The chamber had become a crucible, and something irreversible had been forged in its fire. Jack set down the cup, his eyes sweeping the room with deliberate calm. "Here's what you don't understand," he said. "We don't start wars. We finish them. And once we're in it, once you've woken that part of us, you won't know peace again until you're ash." The Valorian ambassador's feathers sagged, the first true hint of fear breaking through his arrogance. Veltor's gills fluttered in near panic. The Oricai closed its eyes, as though mourning a prophecy fulfilled. Jack straightened, adjusting his jacket, and walked to the center of the chamber, stepping over fallen guards as though they were nothing more than spilled drinks. He looked at the envoys each in turn, then leaned casually against the table, his voice dropping to a near whisper, intimate and cold. "You think today was an accident?" His eyes gleamed, hard and unyielding. "You think I lost control? No. This was the moment, the line you were always going to cross. And now, now the trap sprung." The chamber froze. Diplomats who moments earlier had sneered now stared in dawning horror. For the first time, they understood. This was never Earth begging for a seat at the table. It was Earth flipping the table when the time was right. Jack smiled faintly, as though amused at their realization. "Welcome to the war you thought we were too scared to fight." The boom was not thunder nor gunfire, but the sudden thunderclap of inevitability, the sound of an empire realizing it had walked into its own grave. A tragedy not of blood spilled on the floor, but of arrogance colliding with consequence. The Galactic Empire, for all its centuries of dominion, had finally met a species patient enough to play weak, polite enough to smile while sharpening knives, and ruthless enough to wait until the trap could spring shut. That boom was the death knell of certainty, and it echoed long after the guards' bodies cooled. The chamber still smelled of coffee, cordite, and alien ichor. The diplomats whispered in disbelief, their arrogance cracking like porcelain dropped from a height. The Valorian ambassador's feathers were limp, no longer gleaming with self-sure pride, but damp with unease. The Droxan's gills gasped shallowly, too rattled even to conjure more bureaucratic fury. The Oricai scholar stood still, antennae trembling, as if it had glimpsed the conclusion of a story it had hoped never to read aloud. Jack Harlow stood in the center, calm as a man waiting on a train platform, adjusting the cuff of his jacket as though he hadn't just ended lives with everyday objects. His eyes swept the room, unhurried, assessing every flicker of motion. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost kind. "You came here believing you could leash us, that we were children with knives, too foolish to be trusted. You thought our wars made us weak." He paused, letting the silence swallow the chamber. "But the truth is, our wars made us what we are. They built us into something you don't have words for yet." Saelric tried to speak, his voice trembling beneath its usual sharpness. This is rebellion, an affront to the Empire. You cannot hope to survive our retaliation." Jack tilted his head, as if pondering a chessboard already 3 moves ahead. Retaliation. His grin was humorless. "You still think this is the beginning? That we're reacting? You don't understand. We've been preparing for this moment longer than you've been watching us." Veltor slammed his wet palm against the table. Your planet is exposed. Your fleets are primitive, your weapons outdated. You cannot challenge the Empire's armadas. Jack tapped the challenge coin against the table, each metallic click ringing like a countdown. Exposed, he echoed. No. Hidden. There's a difference. You looked at the surface and saw chaos, poverty, war fatigue, nations squabbling like children. But you didn't look deeper. You didn't notice the silence between the arguments, the times we stopped fighting each other, just long enough to build something bigger. You thought restraint meant weakness. It meant patience. The Orakai whispered, voice soft as a confession. This was bait. Jack's smile returned, sharp as a knife unsheathed. There it is. As if on cue, the alarms outside shifted pitch. The chamber screens, which had been reserved for ceremonial broadcasts, flickered to life unbidden. Across every pane, grainy footage filled the room. Shadows stirring from craters on the moon, vast structures hidden beneath regolith unfolding like metallic flowers. From asteroids long dismissed as barren, engines lit up, revealing fleets camouflaged against the void. Submarine silos on Earth's oceans, thought obsolete relics, rose from the depths, missiles taller than towers glistening with condensation. The alien envoys recoiled. Sailrick screeched. Veltor's gills fluttered violently. The Orakai bowed its head. Jack explained as though narrating a bedtime story. You thought we spent decades disarming, that we were afraid of the stars. Truth is, we buried our teeth deep. We hid fleets under rocks, stashed weapons where no one bothered to look. You saw our public arguments, our dysfunction. That was the cover. Meanwhile, the veterans you dismissed as relics were busy building something new, something you can't chart on your maps. The feeds shifted again, space lit with sudden fire. Human ships, ugly and angular compared to the Empire's sleek designs, surged forward. Their comms broadcast openly, not in tactical code, but in song. Snatches of old country tunes, sea shanties, even classic rock echoing across channels. Alien crews receiving the signals shuddered in confusion. They sing, one whispered, they sing as they kill us. Jack's voice cut through their fear. You told yourselves we avoided war because we were weak. The truth is we avoided it because when we fight to end things. Permanently. Reports streamed across the screens. Empire outposts along the rim silenced in minutes, supply convoys burning, stations hacked from the inside. Human cyber warfare unraveled communication grids, sowing chaos faster than ships could regroup. For every alien fleet that mobilized, 2 more human ambushes flared from a void, hidden in plain sight. Veltor sagged into his damp robes, disbelief coating every word. Impossible. You are primitives. You should not, cannot, possess this coordination. Jack chuckled darkly. Primitives? Maybe. But primitives with practice. You've had centuries of empire, fat and complacent. We've had centuries of killing each other with ingenuity just to survive. Turns out, practice matters. Sailrick shrieked, desperation cracking through arrogance. You dare challenge us with tricks, with hidden fleets, with poker. Jack interrupted softly, his grin returning. We call it poker. Sometimes you bluff, sometimes you hold. Sometimes you play the fool until the pot's big enough to matter. Then you show your hand. He leaned forward, eyes hard as stone. And right now, gentlemen, Earth just went all in. The room seemed smaller, suddenly, the weight of inevitability pressing down. The alien envoys realized what Jack already knew. This wasn't the spark of rebellion. It was the detonation of a plan decades in the making. Humanity had never begged for a seat at the table. They'd built their own table in the shadows and set it on fire at the moment of their choosing. The Orakai scholar whispered what the others dared not. This war will spread. The galaxy will burn. Jack nodded, almost wistful. Yeah, it will. And every song we sing while it does will remind you. We warned you. We told you we avoided war. You should have left it at that. Outside, the echoes of destruction grew louder. Human fleets swarmed like wolves loosed after generations in cages. Alien defenses, once thought impenetrable, crumbled under relentless strikes. Even as the chamber shook faintly with distant concussions, Jack poured himself another coffee, took a slow sip, and grimaced. "Still bitter," he said. "Guess some things don't change." Saelric rose, talons trembling, feathers ragged. "You will be annihilated. The Empire has worlds beyond counting. We will crush you beneath numbers alone." Jack's expression softened, almost pitying. "Numbers don't win wars. Will does. And ours has been tempered by every trench, every desert, every street we ever bled on. You've mistaken survival for submission. That was your first and last mistake." The Droxan diplomat tried to rise, but his legs shook, collapsing back into the damp seat. You cannot destroy the Empire." Jack's smile returned, gentler this time, but all the more terrifying for it. "Maybe not. But we can make damn sure the Empire remembers us. Every planet you hold, every fleet you command, will whisper our name in fear. You thought you found children. What you found were wolves. And wolves don't avoid war. They wait for it." The chamber quaked again, distant but closer now. Human fleets were carving through the Empire's vanguard faster than the envoys could imagine. Their comms crackled with desperate alien chatter, pleas for reinforcements, screams cut short. Over it all, human voices hummed songs, steady, calm, absurd in their cheer. Jack stood tall, pocketed his coin, and faced the envoys one last time. "This isn't rebellion. This isn't defiance. This is justice, for every soldier buried under headstones you laughed at, for every scar you dismissed as weakness. You wanted us contained, but you let us breathe long enough to sharpen the blade. Now you get to feel it." The screens showed the last image the envoys would ever want to see. The Empire's flagship itself, once a symbol of untouchable power, pierced clean through by a swarm of human warheads detonating in perfect unison. Fire consumed it, and silence followed. Jack adjusted his jacket, stepping over the dead without a glance, his voice soft but carrying like a gunshot. "Welcome to the war you thought we'd never fight.